Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
The water industry, quite clearly, is failing. Our rivers, lakes and seas are polluted with record levels of sewage. Water pipes have been left to crumble into disrepair, and I share customers' fury at rising bills. There are hose pipe bans right now in place across the country because not a single new reservoir has been built in over 30 years.
So that was the Environment Secretary Steve Reid painting a stark picture of the water industry the day before Parliament went on recess last month. The public are furious about the sector's performance, but can Labour find a fix without a hefty price tag? Hello, you're listening to Bloomberg UK Politics. I'm Stephen Carroll.
And I'm Lizzy Burden. Welcome to the programme. Stephen, I can remember a time when water barely featured in the national conversation.
Just come out of the taps.
Exactly. It's just one of those things that happen in the background. But because we've got record levels of pollution and you have consumers facing even higher bills, water has floated up the political agenda again. So it really is an issue that's going to need to be tackled before the next election, or else the Labour government just faces a massive backlash.
All of this crystallises in the case of Thames Water. Britain's largest water company is around £20 billion in debt and is on the brink of collapse. It has the worst record for chronic leaks in Britain, and it says it needs to spend £24 billion more to fix things. Now, the government's made it very clear it doesn't want to foot the bill for that. It doesn't need any more big ticket items on its already stretched balance sheet. But it's also struggling to find a solution that's going to please both the debt lenders who refuse to invest without getting a good return and consumers who resent skyrocketing bills for poor levels of service.
Well, joining us now is our resident Thames Water expert, energy, gas, power and renewables reporter, Priscila Azevedo Rocha. Priscila, just remind us, how bad is Thames Water's position and how did it get here?
So in a market update this morning, Thames said that they have money to run into September 2026. So this money comes from the loan that they took from the creditors earlier this year. So it's an emergency solution that comes with a big price tag attached to it. So they have to pay a lot of interest in this loan. This was an emergency solution. Thames right now continues to negotiate with its creditors, and they're aiming to tackle 20 billion of debt, as Stephen said. So that's not an easy task, and it urgently needs equity. The loan will allow the company to operate until next year, as they said this morning, but the debt is still there and is only increasing over time and is unsustainable, so it needs to be tackled. So the company needs to find a more lasting solution. To get back a little bit on how it got to this position to start with. So first, Britain's sewage system is Victorian. It's old. And we have cities like London where the infrastructure is really hard to get to the bottom of it. You can't close a whole street to change pipelines, to modernize and everything, which makes it very challenging. During an era of very low interest rates, water companies, like everyone else in the market, they tapped capital markets and they raised money through that market at very low rates. And they used this money to pay dividends to investors, which in the case of Thames Water at the time was Macquarie, but you also had other private equity companies in different water companies and so on. And with time, we had population growth and climate change. So let's think, in one side, you had a very old, aging infrastructure that needs investing. Money that was put out somewhere else, and climate change that is making dry summers and very rainy periods of the year very hard for water companies to manage, and a higher need for water because of population growth. So all of this came together with interest rates going up and this debt kind of exploding, right? So you had like all these different factors that culminated after years and years that date back to underinvestment in the system.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to get a reminder, of course, of those factors behind it as well. So what are the regulator and the government doing about this right now, or not doing, as the case may be?
Right. To get to this question, we first need to understand that there has been political will for a long time under the Conservative government to keep water bills lower. So the UK had one of the lowest water bills in Western Europe for about 10 to 15 years. And this is also reflecting in the situation that we are now. So as we all know, there's no free lunch, right? And now the bill is finally coming. Ofwat at the moment is in the process of engaging with creditors and Thames to negotiate the debt. But as we all heard a few weeks ago in July, Ofwat is going to be abolished as part of this sweeping review of the government. And throughout this process of negotiations, the creditors, they have made clear that they want some concessions on the environmental fines that Thames Water needs to pay. And Steve Reed, has the Secretary for the Environment, he has said very clearly that the government is not going to cave in for these demands. Just to be clear, Thames is operating now in its breach of its license. The government can't do anything about this in the sense that if they say, okay, you've breached your license, you have to stop operating, as it would be the normal procedure. You have 16 million people in the Thames catchment area without sewage and water, and this will be a big disaster, right? So there's a lot of moving pieces at the moment, but something is going to have to give, is either on the creditor side, is either on the government side, to change the situation from what it is right now.
Yeah, we're all in limbo. So what happens next? How could this crisis play out, Priscilla?
There's two ways that this could play out in principle. It could either be through a special administration regime that needs to be triggered somehow. One of the triggers would be this breach of license, but we've passed that. It didn't happen. We moved on. So it has to come from the government side. The government's preparing for that. They have hired an advisor, but at the same time, they have signaled that they want a private market solution if possible. So if it goes into a special administration, there's a court-appointed administrator that would open up to a process to the market that would ask for bids for companies that would be willing to invest in Thames. In the case of a special administration, it's important to understand that debt stops being serviced. So the company does not need to spend money paying interest on the debt. In the case of this loan that they got for the creditors, it's almost 10%. So it would save them some money in order for them to get their finances back on track. They will still need to pay the debt. They will still need to pay the environmental fines, but it would give them kind of a clean slate to start over and get their finances in place. A second way this could go is that the creditors and the government and the company, they reach an agreement, which has been what all sides have been advocating so far. But right now, they're wrangling at every single point of this proposal. Right? So it is yet to be seen. If this goes back to the creditors' ownership, they will appoint a board that will manage the company, because we're talking here of hedge funds, of funds like Pinco, of Elliott Asset Management and Silver Point, that they are not people that sit at a company and do the day-to-day. They are the investors, so they would appoint a board and continue. They would tackle this debt by restructuring it, but it's possible that in 2-3 years' time, they would like to exit this investment because they are investors. They are in the sector looking for returns. And Thames will find itself in a very similar situation again.
Okay, so certainly very complex and difficult choices to be made all round. Thank you for that briefing. Priscila Azevedo Rocha, Bloomberg reporter there, who's been covering the issues with Thames Water. Now, despite being reluctant to nationalise Thames Water, the Environment Secretary Steve Reed, who you heard earlier, says the government has stepped up its preparations for a potential nationalisation. This as the government has faced criticism from rival parties for not tackling the issue. In the Lib Dem manifesto, the party had called for banning bonuses for water company bosses and replacing Ofwat, the regulator. Both things Labour went on and then did in government. We're joined now to discuss by the Liberal Democrats Cabinet Office spokesperson Sarah Olney. Sarah, good to talk to you. Thank you for joining us. You're also, of course, an MP for an area that Thames Water covers in Richmond's Park, so we can ask you that on two fronts there. I want to ask you, Priscilla's laid out the dilemma there facing Thames Water. What is the Lib Dems' answer to this?
Well, the Liberal Democrats have been calling for quite some time now, in the last Parliament and ever since the last election, for Thames Water to be put into special administration. We think this is the right solution, and we think this should have happened, at least a year or 2 years ago. We think the government needs to put Thames Water into special administration. It can sort out its internal affairs, and then a new buyer can be sought. We think this is the right move for Thames Water, and it's, as I say, it's what we've been calling for some time.
But some in the financial sector, Sarah, are calling Thames Water uninvestable. If you effectively drive away private companies, isn't this going to end up being paid for by the taxpayer?
Well, this is, as I say, we've been calling for this for some time, and I think if action had been taken earlier, I think that Thames Water would be in a better position right now. The situation we find is that Thames Water is absolutely loaded down with debt. I think you said earlier on about £20 billion worth of debt, and this contrasts to, I think, it had zero debt at all when it was privatised, I think in 1989. So something urgent has to happen. There's no doubt that Thames Water can't continue as it is. And you're quite right to point out that my constituents in Richmond Park are really bearing the brunt of some of the situation. We're seeing sewage outflows. We're seeing, so many leakages which are closing roads and causing chaos. Customers are seeing their bills hike, but they're also seeing a real reduction in service. I've had a major issue recently in Richmond, in particular, around reduction in pressure, and this is causing all sorts of problems, particularly for people who live on the first floor or higher. And so, something really has to happen. Customers have really lost confidence in the industry, and that's one of the reasons why we're calling for Thames Water to be taken into special administration. Because what has to happen more than anything else is that customers, taxpayers, and bill payers have to have confidence in the water sector. But what are the other options that exist? You're saying there that Thames Water is becoming uninvestable. We think that if the government takes Thames Water into special administration and restores some of that stability, some of that good functioning, starts to really, and that the company then has an opportunity to start to address some of these really severe operational challenges that it has, it can then become an investable proposition again. And we've seen, this process work not in the water sector, but in the power sector in the past, in the energy sector. We saw Bulb Energy taken into special administration and then sold on again at profit to Octopus Energy. So there is a working example there of how it can happen.
But how much money in the meantime does the government have to be willing to pony up until they can get it back to a state where the private sector will consider putting money into this? Because the amount of money involved is much bigger than some of the energy companies.
I mean, that's an unknowable question, obviously. But I mean,
that's a political choice. I mean, that's the political choice facing the government.
So I was interested in what your reporter was saying there about, there's no debt cost while they're in special administration. And that at the moment is a massive, massive expense for Thames Water. And it is customers, bill payers, who are having to pay those costs. So when it's in special administration, we will be able to see that at least the money that bill payers are paying. And my constituents have seen something like a 30%, 40% in some cases increase to their water bills in the last year. We can see then that money will go directly to addressing some of the issues that Thames Water are experiencing, and not to be servicing debt costs that have arisen as a result of historic dividend payments to shareholders. So that is in itself will be a better outcome for bill payers.
And how much do you think is reasonable to increase bills by then to fix this problem, Britain's water system?
So I think the most important issue that we need to resolve in the short to medium term is that we need to get confidence back in the water sector. Confidence of investors is obviously really important, but primarily bill payers, taxpayers, and people need to feel that when they are paying their bills, and if we're going to see further hikes to bills, then what we want to see is that money is going into investing in infrastructure, that it is going to increase environmental quality of our water, that it's reducing leakage. And I think what is really, really critical here is that we get the regulation right. So Liberal Democrats, as you said earlier, have been calling for a long time for Ofwat to be scrapped and replaced by a proper regulator. And we're really pleased to see the action that the government is taking on this, although it took a long time. We had to wait for the Cunliffe review, which I think reported last month, before the government finally took that action. It's something they could have done a year ago, and we would already be in a better position. We want to see much, much better regulation of the water sector, so that customers can feel confident that when they're being asked to pay increased bills, that they know that money is going directly to fixing the leaky pipes that are currently causing chaos all over their town centres. And that, I think, is the first and most immediate critical step.
OK, well, we'll wait to see what the government does next. Sarah Olney, Liberal Democrat, Cabinet Office spokesperson, thank you very much for joining us. Well, that's it from us for today. If you like the programme, don't forget to subscribe and give it 5 stars so other people can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify or wherever you listen.
This episode was produced by James Woolcock and our audio engineer was Andrew Gavin. I'm Lizzy Verdon.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. We'll be back next week with more. This is Bloomberg.